that up for a few seconds. All right. So let's say now we start on the sum and difference of cubes. And cubes are just raised to the third power. Okay, so what if we have a to the third times b to the third? That's equal to a plus b times a squared minus a times b plus b squared. And for the difference of cubes, let's say a to the third minus b to the third. That's going to be a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. Okay. Now, if you notice, these two formulas are almost identical. If you can remember one, you can remember the other. The only difference is when you have a sum of cubes, this is plus and this is minus. When you have a difference of cubes, this is minus, this is plus. The last term is always positive. Okay, so you know that if you have a sum of cubes, okay, that first sign is going to be positive. Okay, so let's say, for example, and be sure to remember this for the test. I actually have to remember all of them for the test. Not just that one, but. Okay, so let's say, for example, if we wanted to factor x to the third power plus 8. Okay. Now, so far, we've looked at all the perfect squares. But this time, we want to look for perfect cubes. Okay, so the first and last terms are perfect cubes. Okay, so if we have x to the third power, that's just x to the third power. And if we look at 8, 8 is actually 2 times 2 times 2. So that's just 2 to the third power. Okay, so that means our x to the third plus 8 becomes, of course, just x to the third plus 2 to the third. Where in this case, our a is equal to x, and our b is equal to 2. Okay. Now, since this is plus, we know we're going to use this form here. So a to the third plus b to the third, that's a plus b times a squared minus a times b plus b squared. All we're going to do is substitute our a and our b. That's it. So a plus b becomes x plus 2. A squared becomes x squared. Might as well circle those so I won't keep passing it by. So we have x squared minus ab, so you have minus x times 2, which if you wanted to, you can make it 2x right from this step, plus b squared, so it's plus 2 squared. And from there, we just simplify the terms. So x plus 2 times x squared minus 2x plus 4. Okay, and that's your factor. All right, any questions on that one? All right, I'll leave that up for a few more seconds. Looks like everyone's finished. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to factor y to the third minus 64. Okay, so just like before, we see that both are perfect cubes. Y to the third is just y to the third power. Same thing with 64. 64 is just 4 times 4 times 4. So that's 4 to the third power. We kind of clean up this 3 here. Here we go. Okay, so we know that both are perfect cubes. Okay, so that means that our y to the third minus 64 becomes y to the third minus 4 to the third. Okay, where in this case our a is equal to y and our b is equal to 4. Oh, forgot to put our formula up here. So a cubed, minus b cubed. Remember that's a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. So that means in this case, our a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared, move that up a little bit. Instead of a minus b, we have y minus 4. Instead of a squared, we have y squared. Plus a times b, so that's y times 4. Again, if you want to make it 4y right in that step, you could. Plus b squared, which is 4 squared. Okay, so if we simplify it, it's just y minus 4 times y squared plus 4y plus 16. Yes?
On the test, if we put 4y first instead of putting y times 4 first, would that be like points off or no?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay, good.
That's just one of those if you're following step by step, so I don't just skip steps. But if you wanted to just go right from there and just plug it right in like that, you can. Yes?
Would the last term be minus 16 or plus 16?
Plus. The last term is always going to be positive. The only two that change are those signs there. Any other questions? All right, I'll leave that up for a few more seconds. All right. Okay, so let's say, for example, if we wanted to factor x cubed plus 125. Okay, so again, we know that our x to the third, that's just x to the third power. And 125, that's just 5 times 5 times 5. So it's 5 to the third power. Okay, so we can figure out that our x to the third plus 125 becomes x to the third plus 5 to the third. Okay, so we know it's the sum of two cubes. So a cubed plus b cubed, it's going to equal a plus b times a squared. Clean up that a little bit. Here we go. A squared minus ab plus b squared. Okay, where in this case, your a is equal to x, and your b is equal to 5. Okay, so that means your a plus b times a squared minus ab plus b squared. That would just become, instead of a plus b, you have x plus 5. Instead of a squared, you have x squared. Minus ab, so minus x times 5. Or again, if you wanted to make that 5x, you can. Plus b squared, that would be plus 5 squared. Okay, where if we go ahead and simplify it, you have x plus 5 times x squared minus 5x plus 25. All right, any questions on that one? All right, I'll leave that up for a few more seconds. Looks like everyone's done. Okay, so what if we have problems we have to factor using, clean that up a little. Both the difference of squares and the sum and difference of cubes all in the same problem. Okay, let's say, for example, if we wanted to factor x squared minus 16x plus 64 minus y squared. Okay. Normally when you see four terms, you think factor by grouping. The only reason that wouldn't work is because of that y squared at the end. Okay, so whenever you see four terms with two different variables, especially just that one lone y squared at the end, you probably can't use the factor by grouping. So this is where this step will come in. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, if you notice, the first three terms make up a perfect square trinomial. Make up a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so since we have our x squared minus 16x plus 64 minus y squared, these three terms here, remember that x is just, x squared is just equal to x squared. And 64 is equal to 8 squared. And this middle term here, actually, let me go ahead and just rewrite it. X squared minus, leave that blank, plus 8 squared minus y squared. Remember, this middle term here has to be 2 times a times b. Okay, so in this case, our a is equal to x. Our b is equal to 8. So 2 times a times b is just 2 times x times 8, which is 16x. So these two match up. Okay, so that means your x squared minus 16x plus 64 minus y squared becomes, remember those three terms, just x minus 8 squared. Minus y squared. Okay. Now if you look at it, you have two squared values separated by a minus sign. So what you did, you turned those four terms into a squared term minus a squared term. Oops. So now we have a difference of squares. Remember, difference of squares is just a plus b times a minus b. A squared minus b squared is a plus b times a minus b. So here, if you have 8 minus x squared minus y squared, that just becomes x minus 8 minus y, or plus y, or x minus 8 minus y. Doesn't matter which one's first. Because remember, this is your a plus b, so that's a plus b, and a minus b. Any questions on that one? I know that one can get a little bit tricky. All right, leave that up there for a few more seconds. Right. Okay, so let's say we wanted to factor x squared minus 18x plus 81 minus y squared. Now, the first three terms, you don't have to use a perfect square trinomial. You can factor the first three terms the easiest way you see fit. Okay. So remember, x squared minus 18x plus 81 minus y squared. If we look at those three terms, there's nothing in front of the x squared, which means we can find two numbers that multiply to equal our c, and those same two numbers add to equal our b. Okay. So in this case, negative 9 works for both of them. So negative 9 times negative 9 is positive 81, and negative 9 plus negative 9 add to negative 18. So that means this will factor to become x minus 9 times x minus 9 minus y squared. Which, if you simplify it a little bit, x minus 9 squared minus y squared. Okay. So in this way, actually you could have done it on the last one also. Slide this up a little bit. Two numbers that multiply to equal 64 and add together to equal negative 16 would have been negative 8. So you end up with x minus 8 squared. Okay. So once you simplify it that way, you end up with your difference of squares. Where we know that a squared minus b squared is a plus b times a minus b. So that means if your a is x minus 9, and your b is equal to y, your a plus b times a minus b Uh-oh. Will just become x minus, well, x minus b, x minus 9. Sorry about that. Okay, so x minus 9 plus y. And x minus 9 minus y. All right, so any questions on that one? All right, I'll leave that up for a few more seconds. Looks like everyone's done. Okay, so what if you wanted to factor 25x squared minus 60x plus 36 minus y squared?